So if you don't already have somebody, in your life or on your team, a banker, advisor who you lean on to help make these decisions when it comes to your finances, your savings, etc. Or if you do and you're kind of just open to an unbiased opinion of somebody who's not gonna get paid whether you follow the suggestions or not, this video will be very valuable around the cost of living, where it's headed, and your savings, whether you have savings and you're trying to figure out where to put it, or if you're trying to develop savings and you're trying to figure out the best vehicle to use to get yourself there. You'll get some valuable information from this video. So the first thing that we need to focus on is the cost of living, because the cost of living deeply impacts your ability to save. We all know that, basically your savings comes from the delta of your earnings versus what you're able to keep, against your expenses, right? So basically whatever you earn and actually take home versus what you have to put out, the delta is where your savings is gonna come from. So if, your earnings might be stable, but everything you're paying for is getting more expensive, then at the end of the day, that's going to deeply affect your ability to save money. And then there's also the cost of living and the other factors behind that influencing what you can earn on your money. Part of your savings is what you're earning on your money, its ability to keep value. So there's a lot of moving parts to that. So two major influential factors to cost of living is going to be the money supply, and it's going to be interest rates. And to make that simple for you, in case that's not something that's like already in your wheelhouse of understanding, the money supply part is going to be how much money is in circulation, especially versus like goods and services that are out there. For an example, the environment we're in now is partly due to the fact that a lot of money was pumped into the system during the COVID situation and thereafter, that basically had a lot more dollars chasing the same amount of goods and services, give or take. You had a lot more money in the system, so people had the ability to all try to funnel that money in on the same items that we all need and use. So that was one factor. The next is going to be the interest rates. That comes in multiple different facets. If you are dealing with an item or a service that has financing related to it, then obviously if interest rates go up, that's going to influence the cost of that particular good and service. The other side of that equation is you might be buying something outright. You might be going to get your oil change. You might be, buying groceries from the grocery store, whatever the case may be. What ends up happening with that situation where interest rates come into play is that the provider of those goods or services, they have to deal with the interest rates, because a lot of times they're financing, those items, or, in some form or fashion of their operation, they're dealing with higher interest rates. So they're passing the cost along to us. Hopefully that makes sense so far. So where is that headed in the near future? Now that we kind of have an idea of who's going to be in office politically, who's going to be making those decisions, and then we have a stable Federal Reserve for the next 2 years or so, give or take, assuming that things don't change under the new administration. Where is cost of living? Where is, interest rates and money supply? Where is that stuff going, to the best of our knowledge? We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know for sure. Things could change drastically, and they've done that a lot in the last, 3, 4, 5 years. But for what we can best tell, there's a lot of uncertainty, even to the point where the Federal Reserve itself has started to slow down its projections and predictions now that the new administration has been, brought to the table. So even the people who control the, like the monetary policy and like the interest rates and stuff, they're not really sure what's about to happen, because the new administration is gonna, at least making the argument or promoting itself to be so radical. So you have a lot of like tax cuts on proposal, on the table that are being proposed. You have, a lot of like pro-American policies in the sense of like domestic production and stuff like that. So, a lot of the tariff conversation, etc. You've been hearing that in the news and the media. All of these things are wrapping into whether the Federal Reserve is going to like lower interest rates like it's been planning to do, is also going to have a deep impact on how inflation works out. If the government's collecting less revenue from taxes, depending on how that plays out in economic production, that in itself could cause a deficit issue. If you have tariffs going on, that is going to potentially get passed on to us, where, basically a tax is being put on countries and companies trying to bring goods and services to the United States, and there's an additional cost for that for them, then that likely could get passed on to us. So that's kind of inflationary. So you can kind of see there's a lot of moving parts to where things are headed. The only word I can give you right now is uncertainty. Like, there's really no definitive answer or direction of where things are going to go. What I can say is, money supply wise, it's not likely that the government's going to spend less money at all. We've already had 4 years of the presidency that we're looking like we're about to have. And even though he was conservative in political views, etc., he definitely wasn't conservative in the paychecks and in the budget. The last 4 presidents or so we've had have all like toppled each other when it comes to the spending component. So the likelihood of the president coming in and like being better off with spending than the last administration is not likely. What that basically means is the government is going to spend a lot of money, which is going to deeply affect inflation, and the inflation is going to deeply have an impact or an effect on the Federal Reserve's policies on interest rates. Because if things don't continue to stabilize with inflation, then the Federal Reserve is going to kind of be forced to stay flat on interest rates and maybe even have to talk about going back up on them. Now that hopefully all of that context is in place, where does this tie back into your money, your savings, etc.? Your savings is, again, going to be deeply impacted by the rising cost of goods and services. That is looking like something that could continue on. You got to keep in mind inflation is a gauge of how fast things are getting more expensive. So when inflation is coming down, that doesn't mean the cost of goods and services is coming down. It just means that it's rising slower. Our economic policy and monetary policy wants some level of inflation by default. The target number you may have heard is 2%. So it's not that anything's going to come down in cost, and things have already gotten radically expensive. We talk about that a lot lately on the channel. Insurance costs, food costs, gas, energy costs, traveling expenses, like anything related to your kids is getting more expensive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything that we function off of is getting more expensive. I honestly can't really think of anything that stayed the same or gotten cheaper, to be honest. And what that basically means is you're going to have to fight to either try to earn more money or find other various ways to cut those expenses down, and that's really your only 2 major choices when it comes to maintaining or continuing to build out your savings. You don't have a lot of options. I mean, either that delta we talked about earlier on, either you're making more money or you're finding a way to cut expenses down. It's pretty much what it is. So if the system is going to continue to churn forward with things getting more expensive, then that's something that you have to keep in mind. The next thing you have to keep in mind, we talked about a little bit earlier, is going to be, what am I going to be able to earn on my money? Where should I be parking my money? That's really the juicy part of this conversation. Like, where should I be putting my money based on if I already have a decent amount saved and I'm looking to build on that and keep it going and protect it? Or, am I in a situation where I'm trying to start saving and, trying to progress forward in that direction and start to put some kind of savings together? I can't answer every single question around that because, again, I'm not necessarily working with you one-to-one. But what I can give you is some context around, depending on your age, how much money you already have, what your savings is for. Those are going to be things that we can kind of get some context on. So if we start from, being younger and, do this by age brackets, and let's just say you're closer to that train that's like looking to build up on savings. Obviously, again, you're going to have to do a lot of work on either trying to mitigate your expenses or try to keep your expenses flat and really increase your income. Your options are going to be continuing to work off of the decent interest rates on high yield savings accounts and CDs and money markets. While you're putting that savings up or starting to build that savings up, you're going to want to do your best to take as little risk as possible with that money. Keep it out of sight and out of mind as much as you possibly can. You know yourself better than anybody. If you're somebody who needs to hide that account or open it up at a bank that you're not going to easily access that money to get it out, then that's what you need to do. But high yield savings accounts and CDs are still doing pretty good. So, if you're in a bracket where, for whatever reason in life, regardless of age, if you're just in a situation where you're just building up a savings, that's a good route to go. If you have existing savings already, like you already have $10, $50, $100,000 or more, the same applies. High yield savings and CDs, like I'm, using American Express right now, they're doing pretty good on both of those options, high yield savings and CDs. Obviously a lot of different banks that are nationally accessible or even in your backyard are doing pretty good in those departments because interest rates they've been cut, but they haven't been cut that drastically and come down that drastically yet. There's still a lot of levers in play that are keeping interest rates in a decent place. You can get 4+ % still in high yield savings and CDs. So if you're starting a savings journey, or you already have decent savings, that is an immediate place you can go and take very low risk. The next layer you can go is you can try to find, you can test certain areas of the buying market and try to play that game for a little while. Bonds kind of have an inverse relationship with interest rates. So, with interest rates kind of fluctuating, they're kind of higher, but they're kind of trying to come down. Some bonds may be doing well for you right now. Like, you can take a look at that if you want to get into the market and try to play that game. There's some bonds that are still going to pay well right now if you already have a decent amount of savings. I wouldn't necessarily say if you're building savings up that would be a good route. This is going to be more attractive if you already have, again, maybe 10,000 or more, 50,000 or more, 100,000 or more, and you're trying to figure out where to park it. Bonds could be okay. You could also go to, if this is a little bit longer term, so think about maybe like 3 years out or give or take on that money. If you're just not willing to make aggressive investments right now, then you can look at some dividend paying stocks. You also, depending on your age bracket, this is going to be a little bit more applicable for those who are like 50 plus because of the tax situation. Fixed annuities are a really decent place to be and have been for about 1.5 years, nearly 2 years. If you've missed that train up to that point, at this point in time, a fixed annuity between 3 to 5 years can lock you in at somewhere to north of 3% or north of 4%. You're going to get tax deferred growth. You're going to get the legacy planning part where you can have heirs or beneficiaries in those different financial instruments. So, and fixed annuities are a decent place to be right now. They really are. So if you're 50 plus and you have catching this video and you got decent savings, that's a good place to be. If you're younger than that, it probably won't be the best idea because there's tax implications around that may not work for you, maybe a little bit over 50. So that's a good route to go. Dividend stocks, some bonds, various money markets, high yield savings, CDs are a decent place to park it. Overall, you're going to want to kind of gauge the level of risk that you're willing to take with your money right now. That's really important for you to understand. There's going to be, not consistently per se, but there's likely going to be a continuous inflation in the value of the stock market and in real estate. Either way it goes, regardless of the policies that are put in place, there's going to be hot spots in the stock market, and in residential real estate is going to get a lot of focus and a lot of money poured into it. If you're not willing to jump into those with both feet and really start investing heavy based on the money you have, and you also got to keep in mind, if you're going to invest, this is kind of veering off into a different conversation, but just to close this video out, if you're going to look into investing, you're weighing that out in your mind. You make sure that you keep it a reasonable amount of reserves. 3 to 6 months is pretty numbers that get tossed out that you might want to consider. Your situation may vary and it may need to be less conservative. It may need to be more conservative than that. But, if you're going to play in the stock market, you got $5, $10, $15, $50, $100,000, you definitely can consider your options in the stock market. If you don't know what you're doing with that, just track the broader S&P 500. Don't try to get creative, or just find a handful of staples companies you use or like, the Teslas, the Costcos, the Apples of the world, and jump into those, Google, etc. S&P 500 is a good place to be. Tracking a broader stock market, that is 9 out of 10 times going to do pretty well in the broader scheme of things. Real estate, of course, that's a really tough. I might not even get into that too much right now because that's a video in itself. That is really difficult market to gauge right now where it's going. All I can say is not likely looking to go down, but whether it's going to accelerate or prices are going to go up fast or they're going to stay steady, it's hard to say. I'm not going to get too far into that. So just to kind of wrap this up, high yield savings and CDs will continue to be attractive for now, even with the Federal Reserve slowly pulling rates down. If you can get 3 to 4% plus, not FDIC insured, no real significant risk, go that route. Money markets fall in that bucket. Annuities and bonds, the dividend stock. If you're 50 plus, or if you just got a decent chunk of money, that's a good place to look into. Again, keep in mind with the annuity thing, great product if you're over 50, 55 years old. Really good place to be right now for the next 3 or so years with your money if you don't have other plans. Dividend stocks, keep a 3-year window in mind. Don't jump into the stock market for just 6 months at a time or 9 months at a time. You definitely want to put 2 to 3 years minimum in on the stock market. Bonds, definitely going to want to gauge that based on which type of bonds you get in. There's bonds that you can get in for a few months. There's bonds that you want to be in for a few years. Do your research on which ones are going to make the most sense. Muni bonds and some of these other bonds right now that are going to be attractive based on where things are going. But keep in mind, interest rates are changing a lot or have the potential to change a lot. So keep your eyes on that if you get into it. It's not going to stay the same for an extended period of time. So hopefully this just gave you a little bit of context and got your wheels turning. I'm about to get ready to get out of here. Drop a comment down below. Let me know if you got additional questions, if you need me to dive a little bit deeper, or if you want me to expound on further topics. You want me to talk about this from the debt side of things, borrowing side of things. I can get into that as well. Comment down below and let me know any questions you got, thoughts you have, what are predictions you have, where you think things are headed with the new administration coming in, interest rates, cost of living, inflation. Drop your comments down below. To all my pioneers, welcome back. To my new viewers, welcome in. As always, I want each and every one of you to stay focused, stay in motion. I'll see y'all soon. This is my blueprint for financial empowerment and self-sufficiency. This is my blueprint for optimal health and body mastery. This is my blueprint for mental, physical, and spiritual momentum. This is my blueprint for prosperity.